This episode of ReForged is brought to you in part by Blue Snowball. With an excellent support team that will replace any damaged or unworking Snowball microphones, headphones, and accessories, it's the most intuitive USB microphones for any application. Blue Snowball.
I offer you a choice. Join my crew and postpone the judgment. We serve.
Hey, what is going on, all my fellow godlies and Warframe enthusiasts around the world? This is Vance from the ever-popular web series of Warframe God Builds. And in today's episode of ReForged, we're going to be covering Poseidon, Davy Jones, the Flying Dutchman, King of the Seas, HYDROID Prime himself. So in case you've been living under a rock for like the past month and you haven't realized all the different reworks that have altered HYDROID, we're going to cover it for you and recap why everything's different. So, the biggest change came in the form of Undertow. Undertow can be affected by all abilities now, meaning that if you start drowning enemies, you can also hit them with the Tempest Barrage. You can move your puddle with the Tidal Surge, effectively moving it across the map, and Tentacle Swarm can also affect them as well. The coolest thing about this, I think, in my opinion, is the fact that all your allies can attack foes that are underneath the water. So if there's ever a dick HYDROID that's just kind of prolonging the agony of like a long defense mission wave, then you can effectively shoot into the pool and kill the enemies quicker. And it does conserve HYDROID a little bit of energy. However, the biggest drawback to being in the Undertow so often is that it just drains so much energy. Not counting all the energy that you will waste casting Tempest Barrage, Tidal Surge, Tentacle Swarm, Undertow will also drain energy consistently, while also draining a bit more when you reach out to grab enemies and move yourself, because Undertow can be moved now. It doesn't have to rely on Tidal Surge for movement. You can move around with your analog stick or your keyboard, whatever you're using, and also you can grab enemies with the fire function from a relatively short distance. So it's encouraging, I feel as though, in my opinion, it's encouraging all powers to be used in unison. I feel as though this kit is now a well-rounded kit that makes HYDROID more versatile in-game. He still has issues. I think that shield gating would fix whatever he's got going wrong. Other than that, we're going to rely very heavily on our build to survive in-game threats. Now, if you take a quick glance over this build, you're going to realize that it's not a whole lot different than the initial build we did for Season 1 of God Builds. And it's mostly because a lot of some of the mainstays here, they need to still be here. Curative Undertow is an absolute must. I would say that you need to have this build, no matter what type of build you're rocking, you need to have Curative Undertow, because HYDROID can effectively negate incoming damage and heal himself. This is crucial and essential to any build whatsoever. Pilfering Storm, not so much. If you're not really big into getting loot like Necros players, then you could do away with this. You could replace it with something of your choice. However, I choose to use it, A, because it helps with loot, and B, because we're also using energy conversion this time around instead of something like an Intensify, Transient Fortitude, or Blind Rage. And it's simply because, you know, once you do your Tentacle Swarm once, you'll start spawning energy orbs. You'll rely on the energy orbs to do more damage. It's kind of like a snowball effect. Aside from the obvious Prime Continuity and Prime Flow, things that you should automatically be upgrading your builds with to begin with as soon as a Prime releases, Redirection, Constitution, Cunning Drift, Energy Siphon, and Streamline make up the newest form of HYDROID. But the biggest change in his loadout comes in the form of all the weapons that I've chosen to use. Cyberus Prime being one of them. This is just a beautiful weapon all around the board. Vital Sense, Prime Shred, Stormbringer, Infected Clip, Serration, Split Chamber, Argon Scope, and of course a Riven mod for Cyberus to make it do multi-shot, slash, and damage to Corpus. I would love to re-roll this and get, you know, maybe 3 positives, no negative, 4 positives, that would be great. But for what it's doing right now, it's doing pretty nice. It's definitely in-game worthy. I'm in love with the Cyberus Prime, and I definitely got to give credit where credit is due to Digital Extremes. They're putting polarity slots in new weapons, and they're also putting in mechanics that make these weapons worth it. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when I review the Arca Plasma. Now, I favor the Arca Plasma, which just came out, specifically because it's unique. It's a Corpus shotgun that doesn't fire like a shotgun. It fires like a pulse rifle, something that fires like it looks like it fires a gust of wind. I'm going with prime point blank. Don't mind the fact that it's shaded out. It's because my Sentinel is using a shotgun, and this is also a shotgun. So I'm using prime point blank, scattering inferno, blaze, contagious spread, blunderbuss, laser sight, hell's chamber, and seeking fury. All of these mods together are going to address the issues that the gun itself has, while also doing really good damage and doing good damage to a crowd. This weapon is going to be really nice to use in HYDROID. It's going to be nice to use with anyone who clusters enemies together, such as Nidus, Vauban. I would use this with pretty much anyone. I just love using it with HYDROID, specifically because Tentacle Swarm has a tendency to whale enemies around, therefore making them harder to shoot. And because this has such a wide range of attack, it's really nice to kind of leave it open to interpretation where your shot is going to land. However, if you do manage to land near their head, you're going to benefit from that 120% crit chance while aiming for 9 seconds. Now, I did talk about how DE has been adding unique mechanics to weapons, and I did talk about how they've also been adding additional polarity slots, which negates the grind factor a little bit, in my opinion. If they didn't add the polarity slots, then you'd obviously have to put more forma into whatever weapon of your choice, making it a little bit more tedious. So as where some weapons may require 5-6 forma, this only required 3, and it wasn't that big of an issue to level up. I think that it's a wonderful time to be involved in Warframe, and I've got to give credit where credit is due. Like I said, Digital Extremes is pulling out a really awesome effort. For Secondaries, I'm using Ballistica Prime, and again, one of these weapons that has such a unique mechanic. The biggest reason why I'm using the Ballistica Prime is because you can have ghosts effectively on your side while you're fighting, and that's amazing to me. I think that it's a little underwhelming. I estimated that they last probably about 10 seconds, and I would prefer to have them last like 20 at bare minimum, 30 at mid maximum. I just don't think that they last long enough to be worth a damn. I don't personally enjoy this weapon other than its passive ability to turn enemies into ghosts. It's very helpful. It distracts foes from attacking you. There's been times when I was in the undertow and my ghosts were distracting. This is the biggest reason why I think the ghosts should last longer, is because they distract to give me enough time to go into my curative undertow and heal myself, but they don't distract long enough to concern themselves with like a full wave of defense. Not that I would want them to last a full wave of defense. I fully expect to not be spending my entire time in the undertow. That's why I use Ballistica Prime, because it's inspiration for me to stay out of the undertow and keep shooting enemies. For melees, I'm going with the Sylvanegus Prime. I've got Fever Strike on here, Shocking Touch, Blood Rush, Healing Return, Prime Fury, Prime Pressure Point, Drifting Contact, and Condition Overload. Only thing I'm going to supply with this information about the Sylvanegus Prime is the fact that with Healing Return, you're not going to need it with HYDROID Prime, obviously, because of the Curative Undertow. So if you want to go ahead and swap out Healing Return with Northwind and convert your normal Corrosive and Heat to Corrosive and Blast, that'll work too. If you're using this on HYDROID Prime, then there's really no sense in using Healing Return because of your Curative Undertow. But I'm using it for multiple Warframes, which is why I'm using Healing Return, and I would personally recommend that you use Healing Return for Sylvanegus Prime on anyone else, anyone who's not capable of healing themselves. Now I'm just going to skip my companion loadout altogether because it really doesn't matter what companion you're using, just as long as it's a Sentinel, because with HYDROID Prime, due to his build, a lot of builds that we do for companions such as Kubros, Helmets, Chargers, and Kavats, it relies heavily upon linked shields, linked health, linked armor to make them tankier, that way they never go down. And if you were to use that technique here, your companions would still be squishy, and that's just not the way to go. You definitely want to use a Sentinel with HYDROID and build them the way that you see necessary. I've used a ton of builds with Sentinels by now, so you should have an idea of what you're doing with the Sentinel. As far as the lens is concerned, I would definitely go with Vizarin, and I'd put all my points into New Moon, as I always encourage you to do, because you don't want to spend any amount of time trying to revive your teammates with HYDROID. As we mentioned earlier, he's squishy. The more time he sticks his neck out trying to revive his teammates, the more vulnerable he's going to be in-game, and the more often he's going to go down. So to avoid that, just equip the Vizarin lens. Straight from your Mending Tides, go to the New Moon and start upgrading that as much as you can, because this is going to ensure that you can just go up to your friends, click X to revive them very quickly, and be on with your life. So if you learned something from this video and you liked what I'm putting out, then it always helps if you smash that like button. Comment, share, subscribe, do everything I always encourage you to do. And until next time, this has been Vance, signing out. Peace.